You didn't have a session last week. Were you
Good,
interested?
good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Twilight Bible study at Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Very glad to have you with us. I've got Art here and Garrett here in the office with me, and joining us online is Megan, and that looks like Lorraine's phone number, maybe. John Olson is
Yes.
on Facebook. Hi, Lorraine. Welcome. I see John Olson just
Hi.
popped up on Facebook. So we are in Second Kings. Did I say first? No, Second Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. John says, good evening. And so it's 5:45, so let's go ahead and get started. We may have a couple others join up. And I can't remember if Teresa said she was going to be here tonight or not. But anyway, um, so this is a very interesting chapter. There are several interesting stories in the Kings, the books of First and Second Kings. Um, this is certainly a very interesting one, and one that Jesus referred to as recorded in Luke chapter 4, verse 27. I'll talk about that in a bit, because the message of Second Kings chapter 5, if you look at the entire chapter, actually, if you go all the way through verse 27 through the end, the meaning of the chapter as a whole actually very much reflects what Jesus said in Luke chapter 4. So it's going to be really important for us to take a look at that. So the reason I say that is that if you look at let me just give you an outline before I read. I want to give you an outline of the chapter and the whole chapter and what happens there, and why it's important to consider the whole chapter. So the part we're going to cover tonight is verses 1 through 14, which is the story of that begins with the successful military commander Naaman. Naaman's mistress has a young Israelite slave girl that had been captured in the Aram defeat of Israel, which the Lord had delivered to Naaman as the military commander. And this young slave girl, that Naaman has leprosy, and this young slave girl says to her mistress, um, what was the name that let's see, if my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. So the mistress apparently tells Naaman about this. Naaman tells the king of Aram, and the king of Aram sends Naaman with a bunch of gifts to the king of Israel. And you have this very humorous kind of situation where the king of Israel panics because he thinks the king of Aram is going to come after him, after already having defeated Israel some years earlier. He's worried that this is just a trap. Um, because the king of Aram said, here, heal this military commander of mine named Naaman. And the king of Israel just sort of falls apart and even rips his clothes up and is crying out, how in the world am I going to do this? This is going to lead to my destruction. And so Elisha, the prophet, hears about the king panicking, and he sends word to him, why are you panicking? And he says, well, tells him the story, and he says, oh, don't worry about that. Just send him my way. So Naaman takes his entourage to see Elisha. Elisha doesn't even go out to greet Naaman. He sends a messenger out, uh, telling Naaman what to do. And what he tells him to do is to dip in the River Jordan 7 times and he will be healed. Well, Naaman is offended by the fact that Elisha did not come out to greet him, and he's doubly offended by these ridiculous instructions for healing. And he makes a comment about, well, why did I have to come all the way to Israel for this when we have two perfectly fine rivers in Damascus that I could have washed in? And again, we have someone very low on the social structure who one of his servants, maybe even a couple of them, convince him to go ahead and wash in the Jordan because it's such an easy thing to do, and he does, and he is clean. He's made clean. Um, that's a quick version. I'm going to come back to it in a minute, but I want to move on to verses 15 through 19. Naaman insists in wanting to thank Elisha for his healing, and so he brings him a bunch of stuff. Elisha says, "No, I'm not going to receive anything." And Naaman says, "Well, um, can I take some dirt with me uh, back to Aram, which is in the present day Syria? Can I take some dirt with me? And also, will the Lord forgive me for worshiping in the house of Rimmon?" Um, and says, can I go ahead and get pardon for that? Because I'll be offering, uh, I'll be bowing there, he says. So it sounds like his plan is to take the dirt back and to offer sacrifices uh, to Yahweh on this dirt from Israel, but he's still going to have to go into the house of Rimmon and bow, and so he's asking for pardon. And Elisha says to him, "Go in peace." Very, very interesting. Go in peace, which it clearly Naaman is theologically confused. Uh, he has some messed up ideas about what it means to worship God, to be a follower of God, at least from a strictly Orthodox Jewish perspective, Israelite perspective. And he kind of senses there's something wrong with that. So he does say, "Can I just go ahead and get pardon for it?" And Elisha says, "Go in peace." Uh, um, well, one of as the chapter continues, we learn that one of Elisha's servants decides that it was stupid of Elisha not to accept gifts from Naaman. And further, um, he seems a little uh, he seems a little uh, upset that Elisha let him go in peace he didn't make him pay anything. He didn't make him do anything. He just told him to go in peace. And so he seems to be upset about that. So this guy, Gehazi, chases down Naaman and lies to Naaman. And he says, my master told me to come because two members of our company of prophets um, need some money and clothes. And so Naaman gives him the money and clothes they even has a couple of his own servants that accompany Gehazi back to um, the Samaria where his master is. But he thought he had hidden it away so that Elisha couldn't see it, but Elisha apparently knew what was going on. And here's the thing. Um, uh, Elisha transfers the leprosy of Naaman to Gehazi and his descendants.
Okay.
So you can see, I think, well, let me say this. When Jesus refers to Naaman, it's in the context of his reading from Scripture in his hometown of Nazareth in Luke chapter 4. And what he says is uh, that's the place where um, he reads from actually from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Um, and he rolls up the scroll and he sits down and everybody's looking at him and he says, "Today the scripture's been fulfilled in your hearing." Well, they were amazed at him, but then they started asking questions. Wait a minute, isn't this Joseph's son? Uh, this is where he replies, "Doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, 'Doctor, cure yourself.' And you will say, 'Do here also in your hometown the things that we've heard you did at Capernaum.'" And he said, "Truly, I tell you, no prophet is accepted in the prophet's hometown. But the truth is," and this is where he quotes or he refers to the story of Elijah um, feeding the widow who and her son who were starving, and miraculously provides um, flour for them so that they don't run out of flour and oil. And then he has this reference in verse 27. This is Jesus speaking, there were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian. So you can see the theme here that has to do with the Lord's favor, the Lord's healing. Uh, in 2 Kings chapter 5, favor is on the non-Israelite military commander Naaman, not only because he was able to defeat Israel. And by the way, that's not a that by virtue of Israelite theology, the enemy, no enemy of Israel could defeat Israel without the Lord's favor. So it wouldn't really have mattered who defeated Israel. It was by the Lord that they were able to do so. So you can see in the story too that even though Naaman is called great, you can see that he's not, the favor that the Lord is showing him is not particularly have to do with his character or his, certainly not his ability to quote the law, for example. And or his familiarity even with the practices of the ancient Israelites and his kind of confusion there in chapter 5 about what it means to worship uh, Yahweh. Um, but here the Lord's favor is shown to Naaman uh, in his defeating Israel. But then he contracts leprosy at some point, which is a skin condition. It usually means being ostracized from the community when that happens, or at least isolated from the community. And so he's brought low by this, um, and a way is shown for him to go to be healed through a slave girl, and incredibly he does this. But anyway, back to the main point. the non-Israelite is shown favor and is healed, and the Israelite, Gehazi, is given leprosy. And there is an important central message and lesson here, which has to do with how God works in the world. Um, God's work in the world is not limited to our group. uh, it's not limited to our our family, our church, our community or neighborhood, our state. It's not limited to who it fits in our group, and that's um, exactly what Jesus was saying in Luke chapter 4. That the his own people found so offensive. Um, so that's the kind of general theme of this story from Second Kings chapter 5. Um, Now, let's look at a little bit more closely. Any questions or comments about that? We've had several others join us on here. Looks like Cedric is on here, and also Richard um, Rosevitz. Glad to have you guys.
What was Gehazi's sin?
Well, there were several things, don't you think? He lied to Naaman, and then he tries to hide his act from Elisha. And let's see here. Let me go back to the passage. Then he lies to Elisha. Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" He answered, "Your servant has not gone anywhere at all."
Mhm.
So, uh, um, and you have this interesting response, which I'll read from verse 26. But he said to him, that is, Elisha said, "Did I not go with you in spirit when someone left his chariot to meet you? Is this a time to accept money and to accept clothing, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, and male and female slaves? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever." So he left his presence leprous, as white as snow. So, yeah, so Gehazi's sin, well, there were several things going on there. It seemed to be a kind of greed too, wanting money and clothes for himself, and uh, um, and then lying about it all, covering it up.
So long history in the Bible.
Yeah,
A couple of sins.
there's a long history of stories of people who lie. Yes, this is
And
true.
good stuff.
Well, this is one of the very interesting things about developments in artificial intelligence. They're having a lot of trouble creating an artificial intelligence that never lies. And the reason is because artificial intelligence follows language patterns.
Mhm.
And in language human patterns, you find lies.
Yeah.
So if they're strictly speaking, if an artificial intelligence is and this really is what it is, artificial intelligence is really simply a mirror of language that's reflected back. And so it's not terribly surprising that it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to create an artificial intelligence that will always tell the truth.
That's really worrisome.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. I mean,
Well,
what would be worrisome is an artificial intelligence that always told the truth.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the main point is that I think is that artificial intelligence can't really tell the truth or a lie.
Right.
Uh, that it really is just linguistic patterns
Mm.
that are being copied. And so unfortunately, the way it's set up, it's very persuasive because, of course, it's using language. And so it feels very much as if it's engaged with us in a very human way. And of course, it's not. And I would think there are lots of reasons for that. Part of it just has to do with the nature of language itself. But anyway, lying is pretty central, a pretty central element of human life together.
It, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lorraine.
I was going to say it makes me think of Pontius Pilate saying, "Truth? What is truth?"
Ah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's right.
He'd been in the game too long, way too
Yeah,
long.
very good. Yes, he'd been in the game too long, and yeah, it sounds like a very cynical question at that point, doesn't it? Art, you
Yeah.
had a comment?
Previously been speaking about the rigor of becoming and following the path of Orthodox Jews.
Yes.
And of course, I would imagine that lying just isn't, doesn't align with, what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, it's breaking one of the
Covenants.
10 Commandments, right? Thou shalt not lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that kind of the basis of Gehazi's sin here when you outlined what it was?
Yeah.
That I mean, was he to have been considered as a devout Orthodox Jewish
Well,
follower?
he was one of the way that apparently it worked is that these prophets had schools of mostly men, I think, and Gehazi seems to have been a member of Elisha's school of prophets,
All right.
and yeah, and so he probably would have been held to a pretty high standard, yes, as
They
a
had a direct connection with
yeah.
Elisha.
Yes,
On
he
that
did.
point.
Yeah, they knew each other very well. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So, getting back to the first few verses here, the let's see here. Look at this. Maybe, yeah. So again, I want to emphasize that at the beginning of there, where it says that Naaman was great, and that the Lord had given him this victory. I just want to emphasize that um, that this would have been true for any Gentile, uh, and especially in this story, because interestingly, it's the defeat of Israel that leads to Naaman being converted, um, becoming a worshiper of Yahweh, um, and you know, a glorification of the Lord. Um, this was probably a story that was told um, when the people were in exile. This would have been the kind of story you could imagine that was told. Uh, and because you have the out of the tragedy of Israel's defeat comes something wonderful and great. Uh, so now the other theme that shows up here that I mentioned in our daily devotional that is a theme that we find in the New Testament, and that is that a one of the lesser ones actually becomes a vessel of salvation for this so-called great man, a young girl who had been captured in Israel in that battle that is spoken of. This Israelite girl actually becomes the bearer of hope to this military commander, this Aramean military commander. And it's interesting that it also tells us a little bit about the nature of being a prophet. That is, it seems clear that the prophet was popularly known, that is well known in the communities, and so that would explain why this young girl who doesn't have any status at all would have known about Elisha. And Now there's there's an interesting dilemma here where you could say, well, why doesn't Naaman just take off for Samaria? Well, he's a well-known general himself, and um, he couldn't just show up again after defeating these people without creating a ruckus. So he uses diplomatic means, that is, by going to his own king and asking for help to be able to go back to Samaria, an area that he has already defeated with his army. And the king says, "Okay, we'll make it happen." And so he gives him these gifts and writes a letter for him. Uh, and then that's when you have this very funny part of the story, which is almost like I don't know, it's kind of like a character who just kind of panics and loses control and is running all over the place in a kind of hilarious fashion. Because when he reads the letter, he takes the letter to be a demand that he heal Naaman, and so he panics, saying, "How in the world am I going to do that? I can't do that." And he even uses a famous phrase that we find throughout the Hebrew Bible, which is, "Only God gives death or life." Um, so the story reveals also quite interestingly, and not uniquely. We find this throughout the text. That is, it reveals that the king of Israel lacks faith, and he immediately sees a political problem, and he thinks the whole thing is a setup for the Arameans to declare war again on Israel. I think there's a tremendous lesson there for us, that when things happen around us, maybe let's not think of the political problem first. Maybe let's think of uh, other things going on. I mean, one of the lessons here, I think, particularly with regard to the young slave girl and the servants at the end of this part of the story, who tell Naaman to go ahead and wash in the Jordan. Which reminds me, I haven't read the passage yet. Maybe I should read the whole thing. I did tell the story, but it's that this theme of the lesser ones who are the means of grace for Naaman. They become vessels of God's goodness. And the king of Israel, well, in fact, Naaman himself a little bit later, but the king of Israel is so focused on the political situation that he can't even acknowledge that here's a man who's suffering from leprosy in front of him. He doesn't even, I mean, of course, my first thought would have been, oh, wow, this is an enemy who's in need. I could really make some diplomatic headway here. Yeah. But the king of
Would it
Israel,
have been?
well, what's that?
Would it have been?
Would it have been? Yes, right. That would have been my first thought. Yes. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way we're oriented to things. I think we immediately think of the political and cultural and social expectations rather than being sensitive to God's spirit and being open to the possibility that God is doing something unexpected.
I wonder why he wasn't thinking right away, okay, go see Elisha.
What?
He could
Right.
do.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? The slave girl thought of it. Why didn't the king of Israel think of it?
Exactly.
Hey, go see Elisha. He'll help us out here. Yeah, that is interesting. Well, the story seems to imply that the young slave girl has a faith that the king doesn't have, right? Um, you know,
You know something?
what's that? Go ahead, Lorraine.
This has immediately brought to mind something that happened to me. Now it's a few years ago, but me doubting about what I'm doing, and it was really my idea, even if it was meant as a good intention to get so involved with so many animals. One time when I was in line, I was at the supermarket. I was behind another fellow, and he was he got a lot of stuff, and meanwhile, I had bought a bunch of stuff, and I was getting it out on the table there, and he was around and must have heard stuff, about how, boy, you seem to have a lot of cats, blah, 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 and because I was buying a lot of treats and stuff, and it's a black guy, too, and I didn't pay any attention to him. He was the guy in front of me in line who was just getting ready to leave, and I'm going about my business. And when I get at the end of it, and it was a big bill, it was a good-sized bill, I said, okay, and I start to pull out my credit card, and she says, oh, no, your bill's been paid. And I just, what? What do you mean? She said, that fellow, he just paid your bill. And I see a relation between the two, and it was, I just wanted to tell that story because I thought there was a relationship.
Yeah, that's good, Lorraine. That's very good. I think I think it's pretty common for us to overlook lots of possibilities, lots of ways that God is working in the world because of how we're kind of trained by our own culture and society. And it takes a lot of work, I believe, to kind of resist that and to try to
a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work to resist that and to be open to God's Spirit. We live in a culture where, unfortunately, we immediately make judgments of people based on the way they look, the way they're dressed, their skin color, their accents, their language, and it's
It's almost unavoidable.
Yeah.
well, for me anyway, it's
Yeah.
unavoidable.
I saw two funny clips, intentionally funny clips, kind of funny but sad at the same time. But to make this point, one was this man who was looked from somewhere in the Middle East, and he had a wrap on and wearing a robe, and he takes a backpack up to people. He does this to several people. He kind of listens to it and then puts it down on the table next to him. Then he starts running, and it shows the other people running away too. And then the other one was this police officer, a woman, who had been challenged to a race, and you could tell there were several people around by a black man, and there were several people around, and they were kind of having a good time and this sort of thing. And he said, "I can beat you in a race," and she says, I don't think so." And he says, "Okay, let's do it." And they line up to race, and somebody else says, "On your mark, get set, go." And he takes off, and she pulls out a radio and says, "I got a black man running here."
Oh no!
And yeah, and the social commentary from that is actually quite powerful, because we know it to be true, right? That is, we know that we live in many areas in this country where these kinds of judgments are made immediately based on skin color. And so the Bible, both in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, there are frequent stories. I mean, it's kind of a common theme that that we have a tendency to overlook the ways in which God is present to us because of our cultural, social expectations.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Art.
So bringing this now somewhat into the contemporary,
Yes.
on rather general terms,
Yes.
perhaps, but what we're saying, just to recast some of the words you used earlier, when things happen,
Yeah.
quote unquote, around us, let's not think of politics or but of other things, rather than being rather that we should be open to God's Spirit.
Yes.
I don't know, case in point, the person that just became nominated to become the mayor of New York City is actually, he's an Islamic
Muslim. Yeah.
And there's now some talk about denaturalizing the person. Now we have, I mean, so putting this in context, like we need to think of how God's Spirit may be acting or not acting. Like, let's look at the other side of that coin.
Yeah.
And try to understand what it is that we might gain some kind of sustenance out of, rather than all the negativity around issues like that and everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
That's, to me, an interesting point.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot.
Can you sort of repeat that? Because I couldn't get it.
Yeah, I can do a quick summary of it, I think. Art's point is that there are specific actions and events that are happening in our world right now that that call out for the kind of response that I'm talking about. That is a sensitivity to God's Spirit. What maybe even just the question I would put to you, Art, that is, as a prayer, I find it can be helpful sometimes just to pray to God. What are you doing? What is it that you want me to see here? Because it feels, it feels like Well, anyway, I think you see the point. Yeah,
I mean, the word cruelty comes to mind, and that
right.
seems to be rather prevalent in what we're seeing these days. I don't think we really need to delve into the definition of cruelty. I think we
No,
feel it, we
yeah,
understand it, and uh, your question, what to God, what are we doing, is very interesting. Or what are others doing, in relation to us? That may
yeah,
be a further consideration. Uh, or what are we to do in the face of
yeah.
this perceived
Well,
abundant cruelty that is actually happening? That might be the direction that we need to go in, which is to be open to God's Spirit. I like that
yes,
phrase a
yes.
lot.
So
Okay, but
sometimes it's stand up and take the rotten tomato in the face,
Yeah, that's
possibly.
a possibility, right? There are all kinds of things that we may be called to do. Here's what I would offer in clarification. I want to be clear about this notion of politics because on the one hand, of course, um, being political is in many respects simply means being human.
Mm,
That is that we are political creatures insofar as we are in relationship with other people, we're in communities, we have citizenship uh, somewhere, we have um, we are part of structures and we participate in those structures where we are not physically forced to do so, but pretty much forced to do so in order to get along in our society, right? So we are political. Um,
Hmm.
I think that so when I say, step back from the political, I don't mean political in that way. I don't think you can step back from being human. I don't think you can
no.
step back from being you can't escape the fact that you were born somewhere to parents and under some government and have moved somewhere to under some other government and you know uh, those things are a part of modern life and have been for centuries. Um, I think there's another way that I use political, which is pretty important at our church, and really the word that we're using is partisan. That is, it's important that we
Yeah.
not get caught up in partisan divisions, um, and that the challenge there is that there are forces in our society that are telling us and almost demanding that we must be partisan in order to be political at all. So there are forces, I think, that are, you know, telling us that you have to be partisan.
Mm,
Now, I'm not naive. I know that our country functions and operates under uh, and through political parties, and it's will likely do that for a long time. Um, but I do think it's important to recognize that that God's work in the world is not partisan. Uh,
That's
I don't mean
directly
it's
related to what we're studying.
what's that?
That's directly related to what we're studying right now in the
Absolutely.
Bible, right
I
now.
absolutely agree. It's directly related to what we're studying right now. That is that, the and it was a central part of the Israelite theology,
mm,
the recognition that God is God,
mm,
That's
not
right.
it's the recognition that God is not someone that we can manipulate to do the things that we want God to do for us. That's not how God works. God is God. God does what God does, and the only question is whether we will respond to this God in faith. That is, in humble submission. So now, having said all that, I think that there are clearly times in the lives of Christians when you must act politically. Again, I want to say not partisanly, but politically, and because it's the right thing to do, because it's good, it's just, it's righteous, and so your motivation, it seems to me, needs to be solely focused on what the Spirit is leading you to do, and not focused on, what's going to bring about a partisan victory or a partisan motivation. Because you can see this. I don't know anybody that's going to deny this, right? That when you look at party politics, the primary goal, I think, in looking at both parties, is to make the other party look bad. That's the primary goal.
Plus self-preservation also.
Yeah, self-preservation.
Yeah.
Right. And so, again, I'm not expecting Christians to give up their party affiliations, and I'm not suggesting that you should. What I'm saying is that being a faithful follower of Christ involves an acknowledgement that God's Spirit transcends those partisan divides.
So let
me go ahead. Yes.
So let me test this with you.
Test it. Let's go. Yeah.
So our president has been known to say, God saved me from being killed.
Yes. Right.
God saved me from being killed.
He did say that. Yeah.
To make America. He
Right
didn't say that great. Well, I'm saying that, but God saved me for a time like this.
Yeah.
Well, what do you make of that?
Historically, he's not much of a man of faith. All right, I think if we look into his history, we won't see too many items of evidence that show that he has any sort of strong faith to begin with.
Do you think God saved him?
But yeah, I was going to say neither did Naaman.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, let me throw this out. Actually, I don't think this political versus partisan thing is all that hard to solve, and let me say why. Okay. If we go back to the original Greek, I believe, which is what is the meaning of the word politic? It's city.
The polis.
Yeah,
okay?
the polis.
And that and further the citizens.
Yes.
So those two words are. So when we speak of politics, we're speaking of being citizens in a way. Okay. When we speak of partisanships, we're speaking about being a strong supporter of a party or a cause or a person, something like that. And what we're saying is that that's really not the direction that we'd like to go. We would like to follow the Spirit, okay, which guides us, which as Christians, we feel that Spirit.
Right.
I think the only real problem there is that there's a lot of Christians that have different interpretations of the Spirit.
Sure.
And that's another parallel subject. But if we could just simply say that we are citizens of the city, which is nonpartisan, and that we follow the Spirit of Christ, which we feel and understand in our hearts, then we're on the right track.
Yeah.
Well, then you would agree with that statement.
That
God saved me to reign or to rule because he was elected by the citizens.
I don't know that
It's interesting.
But then the playing out of that is going to be different because
because then subsequently to look at what it is that that person has been doing ever since God saved him.
Yeah.
I have a lot of problem with that.
Yeah.
By the fruits you will know them, of course.
Yeah.
That's not. But I have a
Well,
little story about that as well.
Yeah.
So about 2 months ago, somebody came into our church from the street, and we kind of knew the family a little bit. So he came into our church, and he made himself totally obnoxious. One of the first things he did was greet everybody in the parking lot and embrace them. And
Okay.
so my reaction to that was, I don't like this fellow here. I am going to, I'm going to, and all kinds of feelings and prejudice rose up in me. And somehow the Spirit told me, Garrett, that's not quite right. I
Okay.
mean, you are
mm,
my representative here, and here's a man who came into our midst to minister to receive, and to welcome. So I thought about that a lot, and one of the things I said to myself, God has come into our midst.
Okay.
mm.
That changed my
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. Right.
Well, yeah, I think we need a very broad perspective. Just to be very general, there have been a few incidents here at church in the last period where there have been some behaviors that were rather, let's just say, shocking in a way, and perhaps it would be easy for some of us to have said, "Well, I don't like this person because of this
It
behavior."
was totally easy for me
Okay.
to feel that
And
and to
then,
think
but
that.
then you have to say, well, all of the people that come to this place are coming, for hopefully for the same collective reasons, but quite often from a very different experience or point of view in life. And that it may simply be that we as observers are not understanding the place from which they are coming. And so that we need somehow greater understanding,
Yeah.
which I think you're very good at. I'm not.
Well, what I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, but
Okay.
what I will say is I'm not sure I would agree that I'm better at that. What I would say is that what I work on is being being comfortable with mystery, being
Mm,
comfortable with um, being comfortable with, well, the way that it starts though is it starts with a faith that says, you know, um, God is um, good, and God is great, and God's love is more powerful than anything else in the world, more powerful than the President of the United States.
Easily
God's
done.
God's love is more powerful than the President of the United States. So in starting there, you have already you have all and if your faith is in God, then you've already disarmed this individual that you don't like or don't like what they're doing, or if you can start there, you can say, oh wow,
Well,
God's more powerful than this
I'd
person.
just
I don't
like to,
So it's first thing is I don't have anything to be afraid of,
sure. Yeah,
right?
but I suppose what I was alluding to was a certain sense of the need for tolerance.
Yes. But the need for tolerance is the point is that it's not rooted in us. That is that it's not that I have to get up my courage to be tolerant. It's that I need that if I will simply acknowledge that God is God, then I don't have to um I don't have to worry about my concerns about this person or this president, at least on this ultimate level, right? On the level of eternity, on the level of the eternal. That's the first thing. The next thing I would say is that, okay, uh, God is greater than anything that can happen or any individual that can appear. And that in those people and circumstances, God is already at work, already, and there are, as you alluded to, there are always things that you don't know about this person or this circumstance. There are always things that you simply lack the information. And it seems to me that those are two pretty strong things to stand on when making a decision about how you're going to respond, how you're going to be open to God's Spirit in a particular case, whether it's trying to come to grips with the latest thing that President Trump has said, or whether it's the strange person that walks into the church building, right? So standing on those two things, God's love is more powerful than anything, and God is already at work and doing things. There's just so much that I don't know and I don't understand. And if I can acknowledge that, it seems that that already puts me in the position of being open to God's Spirit.
Yeah. Let me add 2 points. One of which is that I would think you mentioned God is good, great, love, Spirit. I mean, better than the President of the United States, as well as all the other governments in the world.
Yes, right. All the governments. Yeah.
Let's globalize that.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking now about when I mentioned the word tolerance, I'm also thinking about how we are quick to judge.
Yes.
And that that is perhaps, the challenge that perhaps God would like for us to meet. And there are ways in which we can meet these challenges by being less judgmental, more tolerant, and diffusing some of these situations that arise.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying, I can't describe in great methodology as to how that is done, but I feel that I know I'm given guidance somehow as to how to assuage, mitigate, settle down issues that are
well,
confronting us.
every situation is different, and it can be what you're talking about there really is having I'm thinking of the Greek word actually for it's a kind of judgment, an ability to make an assessment and to judge what reaction is needed in that particular time and place.
What's that word?
I'm blanking on it.
Oh,
I'm blanking on the word, but it's a Greek from Greek philosophy. Aristotle talks about it all the time, but it's this ability to be able, depending on the circumstances. And I think that's part of what I mean by when I say being sensitive to God's Spirit and open to God's Spirit. It is a recognition of the context, the people,
Patrick.
place, and
Just let me offer one word there. Diffuse.
Diffuse. Well, if that's what's needed, yes. Yeah. If diffusement is what's needed, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Lorraine.
I wanted to say that and to say it sounds like, isn't on either one, but I really think that what comes to mind is that when some situations arise, uh, God puts the right words into your mouth. That's been my experience, and I didn't even know about it. It's happened a couple of times. I didn't even really know about it until it passed, and then I thought, wow, I didn't know I was going to do that, and it's changed things. I've told you guys about that time that my friend who really needed, I don't know what you call it, but it's something from the state concerning getting an extra amount of money for her situation. She had 4 children and not much money, and her her stepfather had already gone with her to court, and you know where you go and talk about this thing and
Right.
say what your needs are and stuff, and she had failed, and I said I'd go with her again, and she should try one more time, and I happened to say the right thing at the right time, and she got it, and they weren't going to at first, and
Yeah.
I didn't know I was going to say it. Actually, it's like almost being forced to open your mouth.
Yeah. It's very good,
because
Lorraine.
okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's a very good example, I think, of one of trying to resist to resist the inclination to to make a judgment, to react in but rather maybe this is part of what is meant in the phrase to wait on God. That to wait upon God is right, involves, as you say, because part of what happens too when you're in a situation that is maybe tense, or it's a meeting, or there are differences and people are arguing and things of that sort, when you're in that kind of situation, almost everyone reacts in the moment, and it's very difficult to wait upon God. I think one of the things I remember, there was a movie where there was some in a monastery where the monks started arguing with one another and fussing at the abbot, and he just stopped and started praying the Lord's Prayer, and all of them joined in together, and they were all
Great.
praying the Lord's
Excuse
Prayer
me.
together. And yeah, exactly. And it does seem that is the, that's the kind of thing that is needed, and we have to, being open to God's Spirit, I think, means that we have to set aside our immediate reactions.
Yeah.
And then all the right things seem to happen. I mean, they were going to have the end of their day, and they had said she'd come back to court later, or they'd deal with it later, but they didn't take her in, and it was a holiday or the holiday weekend or that was coming up, and everybody go home and have a wonderful time, and they hadn't really dealt with her, and I find myself not wanting to say anything, and I had to say, well, you all go home and have a great time, and she'll go home to a locked refrigerator because she doesn't have enough food to feed her kids, and they can't take what she's got in there in the fridge.
Thank you, Lorraine. You had a comment, Garrett.
Verse that came to mind is work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, because it is God who is at work in you.
Right.
And I think that's very important for us to remember.
I like that one.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's very
by
good.
virtue of faith in Christ,
Yeah.
we dwell in the presence of God.
Yes.
Have the privilege to.
Yes. Yeah, that's good.
Just to follow up on Lorraine's statement about saying the right thing at the right time, I'm recounting all the times that I've said the wrong thing.
Me too.
That's pretty easy to do. Yes.
Well, Well, I like to
Yeah,
forget
that-
those.
yeah.
For that, Lorraine.
but
But Lorraine,
but
as I
that one
said,
is
Lorraine and I are very much alike. So she and I can probably easily remember the times that we said the right thing because it was so rare, right, Lorraine?
You can count on one hand.
Yeah, you can count it on one hand.
right. Yeah, comes to mind easily.
So
few of them.
anyway, we're past time here, so we should take prayer requests and say a prayer before we go. Um, I'll just mention ones that we've been praying for that we're so glad that continue to make improvements. Maria and Leola and Andrea have all been present at church, so they continue to make improvements, and we're so grateful for that. I think D Hupp is also doing better and even traveling out of town this week. So we want to remember those. I want to say thank you again for the wonderful support for our family. We had a beautiful service for Robert and Gracia Faye on Saturday, and Faye and Finian and I, and also Rebecca and Garrett are grateful to the church for the love and support that you all gave to Robert and Gracia Faye and their last 5 years here with us. And so thank you so much for all of that. Most appreciative. Are there other requests?
I'd like to offer a prayer for Larry, who is 87-year-old former colleague from another church who was the victim of an invasion and a burglary into his house.
Oh,
And
Oh,
was
what?
a burglary.
burglary and an attack in his own house in Diamond Bar
Dear
recently.
God.
Um, and whose property was destroyed and trashed, and uh, whose body was harmed by this invader. I'll go that not further than that. Breaking his shoulder, actually. His name is Larry.
Yeah, we'll pray for Larry and for his
Healing.
recovery,
Yeah.
both physically and psychologically,
no doubt.
because that's quite a blow
It is.
psychologically as
Yes,
well.
it is.
Oh.
Other requests?
Just thank God for our beautiful world, and prayers to protect it, that it may go on to not only support us, but that we would act in a way that would appreciate it, so that it can support us and the other creatures on it. This world we live in.
Thank you, Lorraine. I know that Guadalupe would appreciate prayers for her son, Carlos. Carlos had a sinus surgery that was pretty serious, and he's recovering. He's home recovering from that, and would appreciate our prayers. That's Guadalupe's son, Carlos, who lives in Florida. All right, thank you. Let's pray. Our God, we are so very grateful to have this opportunity to join together to read the scripture, to study, and we're grateful for your presence with us in that. And we ask that you would open our minds and our hearts to what we have learned, so that it would be not just a matter of the head, but a way of living for us. And we're grateful for this lesson, recognizing that it's impossible for us to live this way, but depending upon your spirit to guide us and to lead us, that we may be transformed into the people you would have us to be. We come with gratitude for lots of things. Gratitude for healing in our midst, for Leola and Andrea and Dee and Maria. And we're so grateful for how well they're doing. We're grateful for the beauty of this world, as Lorraine said, and we're grateful for the myriad ways in which it sustains us. And we ask that you would help us to develop an even deeper appreciation for our world, for creation and its beauty. We pray also for Carlos that you would continue the healing process as he recovers from surgery. And we ask that you would bless his life and give him strength and courage and good health. We thank you for this community. We thank you for the opportunities that we have here to be blessed, to be able to give to those around us and to our communities. And we ask that you would continue to allow us to do this work and to be with us as we do. Pray these things in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all very much and hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, folks. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.